Hello, welcome to Tarot and Attachment. My name is Erin Smith, and I am an associate marriage and family therapist in the state of California. So, for those of you who follow my readings regularly, you might recognize that there are certain cards that come up consistently over the course of a span of time. And you might recognize them as a message that is coming through that is one that would be beneficial for us to pay particular attention to. So, my thoughts based on some of the feedback I was getting from people, viewers, friends, colleagues, was that it might be interesting to do a deeper dive into not only the meaning of certain cards, but the archetypal representation of them, the feeling tone that they express, and maybe skillful ways to work with that energy in our own lives. So my thoughts are to do specific meditations on certain cards that show up again and again over the course of multiple readings. And this week, I thought we would take a look at the Two of Swords. And the reason being is that for the last, I don't know, five readings I've done in a row and presented here publicly, this card has shown itself multiple times. And I think it's actually a good one for us to look at because I think it has a lot to offer in terms of resourcing, particularly when we're in the midst of distress, difficulty, shifting paradigms, a particular amount of external chaos, or at least uncertainty, and how we might regulate that experience of transiting uncertainty in order to make wise choices about how we wish to move about the world. So, what's interesting about this card is that I specifically link the Two of Swords to meditation. So you might say that we will be doing a meditation on meditation today. But I want to anchor this meditation in the imagery of this card. So first, I'm just going to invite you. You can either look at what's going on in this card here, or if you have your own deck, you can go get it and pull the Two of Swords. And before we sort of go inward and get reflective on our own internal state, and I'm going to take you through a guided meditation, one in particular that I like, that was taught to me by some teachers that have had a profound effect on my life. Let's just soak into the imagery of this card. So I'm just going to ask you to get comfortable because we're going to do some free association, some acknowledging of certain aspects of the image here. And I want you to notice or cultivate a kind of attentiveness to images, impressions, feelings, maybe mental talk that comes up in response to what you are seeing in this image. So what do we notice about this card? First of all, what we are seeing is a singular figure seated comfortably. It's pretty comfortable in the center of the frame. She is the focal point of this scene. And And we also can notice that this is a nighttime scene due to, well, I guess that's maybe not so. We can see the moon during the day, but it is the moon, right? We have this newish moon, either just before or just after the new moon. And the moon in tarot symbolism, it relates to the unconscious and everything that resides below the level of consciousness. We can also see here there's a body of water at her back. And there's a slight movement, a slight rippling effect. So it's not turbulent. It's not stormy. We don't see any clouds in the sky per se. There aren't high peaks of wave activity in this water, but it's also not perfectly still either. It's not glassy and reflective. There is this slight wave-like movement, tiny peaks of movement going on, happening at the level of this body of water. The other thing that we notice that seems important is our figure is blindfolded. And I want you to really notice what comes up inside of you when you pay attention to that detail. What does that mean to be blindfolded? What circumstances might one be blindfolded in? And I'm going to just invite you to notice this. And then certainly an important detail here is, since we're dealing with the Two of Swords, is that this figure is holding two swords. And she has crossed those swords in front of her chest. And again, I'm just going to invite you to notice. In fact, you might even try this right now for yourself, to assume this body posture and notice what's going on internally at a somatic level in your body. What is the quality of sensation in your body as you assume this body posture? And now, maybe now is the time that you can come into a state of relaxation. I'm going to invite you even to close your eyes at this point so that you can stay in contact with what's going on internally. This is an appropriate stance to take when we are dealing with the Two of Swords, going back to this image of the figure who is blindfolded. So this is a figure who is not being distracted by all the physical elements that are going on in her environment. So notice inside yourself now what it's like to close your eyes. Without that sort of visual distraction, does it make certain sense spaces louder or more pronounced? Do the sounds in the room take on a more acute quality? Are you feeling the sensation of any movement in the air on your skin? Are you noticing more deeply this sensation of your body connecting to the surface beneath you? In fact, even notice that sensation in your body, any pressure that may be happening around the level of your legs, around your seat. This feeling of being held upright. And just notice more deeply what it is to turn your attention inward when you are blindfolded. You can imagine now that you're closed eyes. I want you to just imagine yourself assuming the posture of the figure in this scene. You have stepped inside the scene of the Two of Swords. You are invited to go inward to know yourself more deeply at the level of sensory information. And in this case, it is not external senses, at least in terms of sight. It is the experience of listening inward and not having the external world impede our ability to connect deeply with what's going on inside. I want you to also imagine that you are protected, that these crossed swords that you carry are a protective barrier against any harm that might threaten you in this moment. In this moment, you are completely safe. It is completely safe for you to go inward and examine what is coming up in the present tense. And this may take on the form of mental talk or mental imagery. You might notice a narrative forming in the mind. It may be constructed out of worries or concerns for what might happen in the future. It might be a list of things that you need to do in order to get things done and feel a sense of accomplishment. They may be random non sequiturs that are related to this exercise. Maybe they have a judgmental quality. This is hard. This is silly. What's the purpose of this? And I'm going to invite you now to just notice the narratives. There is nothing you need to do to change this. I'm going to invite you to witness this mental talk that's coming up in thought space. And you're going to allow it to happen naturally, without interference, without making it a problem. Opening up to whatever is arising in mental talk space and noticing the words. And as you notice this activity happening in mental talk space, you may begin to notice that the thoughts are stirring up emotional sensations in the body that have a somatic sense. Maybe if there's some particular worry, there's a tightening within the stomach or a closing of the throat. Maybe there's a sort of churling or roiling sensation in the stomach. Maybe if the narrative is one of boredom, there's a sense of heaviness in the body. But just notice what is naturally arising as you begin to bring awareness to mental talk space. How is that affecting sensations in the body? Notice the overlap of these two sense bases and how they interact and influence one another. And again, I'm just going to invite you to bear witness without judgment, without needing to interfere in any way. It's not a problem. There's nothing that needs to be done to change the sensation. You are simply noticing what is going on inside of you and how it is made up of these separate sensory experiences. And as they arise and fall away, they interact with one another. And as you open up and notice these sensations, it may in fact bring you some insight into self, into how activated you are or how calm and regulated you are. What narratives are arising and what belief systems those narratives are hinting at. Notice too that there's a universe of sensation that's going on inside of you, even though there is relatively little activity happening in your external environment. In this moment, things are relatively peaceful. If you have found the time and space to sit and connect with this meditation, notice what it's like to turn your attention inward. Notice what it's like to see in, to feel in, and to hear in. Notice what it feels like to be in this moment and get curious about the quality of sensation that allows you to know you're feeling a certain way. It may be a pronounced and obvious emotional sensation, or it might be more subtle, more mysterious, harder to define. And whatever it is, you are simply allowing it to be present, and you are allowing your awareness to contact it. And in this way, you are noticing this heart-mind connection. Noticing even too that sensations come into awareness, they peak in intensity and have a tendency to fall away or move into some other sensory sensation. And from this place, I want you to take just a few deep breaths, slow and easy. And notice the quality of sensation in your body as you breathe in and breathe out. And now I want you to let this scene fade, and you can begin to bring your attention back to the room that you're in and start to connect more with the external environment. You can open your eyes, maybe wiggle your fingers and toes. And I want you to just reflect briefly on what you noticed as you set this intention to look inward. What did you notice about the narratives that you're running and the effect that that has on your emotional body? The invitation of the Two of Swords is to become centered and to become aware of our own perceptions, our own biases, what is going on internally before we go out in the world and take action. That this kind of self-reflection does a couple of really interesting and profound things. You may notice in this moment that you feel a little bit more calm, a little bit more embodied than you did before you started the meditation. And in a psychological sense, this is a really beneficial state to be in. It's just easier to be non-reactive, to choose what actions we might want to take in response to something rather than just automatically reacting from a dysregulated place. But it's also really powerful to be reflective in this way, to notice that when we feel overwhelmed, when there's some overarching negative self-talk that is causing you to have extreme distress, and these two sense spaces appear to be enmeshed, one solid thing. Notice what happens when we separate these sense spaces out and we see them as activity that's happening separately but simultaneously. How does that change the way that we experience the world? To know that it isn't one solid thing. So this meditation that I did with you is really a version of a meditation that I learned from my teachers around 2007. Michael Taft was the one who initially brought this technique to me, and he was teaching a technique that was developed by Shinzen Young. And I've sat with Shinzen as well. And I'm actually going to link in this recording some lectures of Shinzen. I think he's I can't speak highly enough about him as a meditation teacher and how this technique in particular really changed my life and my healing journey and my trajectory. So I'm ever so grateful. I hope this was helpful to all of you. And please let me know if these meditations on the single card are useful, and I will keep doing them. So may you have a wonderful week. Many blessings to you. Take care.